The derelict transport ship floated silently in the debris field near Kepler Station. Its hull was scarred and lifeless, spinning slowly in the endless darkness of space. Captain Carter Blake had been salvaging wrecks for nearly 8 years, and he knew a picked-over ship when he saw one. Most salvagers had already been through this one, claiming anything valuable they could carry. The cargo bays were empty, the valuable equipment stripped away, and even the copper wiring had been pulled from the walls. Carter guided his small vessel alongside the twisted metal, his practiced eyes scanning for anything the other crews might have missed. He had a gift for finding overlooked cargo, the kind of instinct that came from years of experience and a stubborn refusal to give up on a site. Ben's voice crackled through the ship's intercom from the scanner station. "Carter, there's nothing left here. The Vraxians stripped it before they bailed. We're wasting fuel." Carter didn't respond right away. Something felt wrong about this ship. He'd pulled up the automated logs during their approach, and the records showed a sudden evacuation. No distress signal. No emergency beacon. No pirate attack or mechanical failure. Just abandonment. Ships this size didn't get abandoned for no reason. The Vraxians were cold and calculating, but they weren't wasteful. They wouldn't leave valuable cargo behind unless something had gone very wrong. He made his decision quickly. Carter suited up, double-checking his oxygen levels and seal integrity. The magnetic boots clicked against the deck as he crossed the docking tube into the derelict's lower hold. Emergency lighting flickered weakly overhead, powered by backup batteries that were probably days away from dying completely. The weak lights cast long shadows across rows of empty cargo containers, their doors hanging open like broken jaws. Carter moved carefully through the hold, his helmet light cutting through the darkness. Most of the containers showed signs of forced entry, the locks broken or overridden. But then he saw it, tucked in the far corner of the hold, one container still sealed tight. Its containment locks were fully engaged, and a red light blinked steadily on the status panel. He approached cautiously, years of salvage work making him careful around sealed containers. They could contain anything from toxic chemicals to unstable fuel cells. The status panel told him everything he needed to know, and his blood went cold as he read the warning. Biohazard Class 5 Predator. Do not open. Carter's helmet scanner swept the container automatically. Life signs registered inside. Faint and weak but definitely there. Multiple signatures. Something was alive in that box. Every safety protocol he'd ever learned screamed at him to walk away. Class 5 predators were the most dangerous creatures in known space. They were the kind of animals that made planets uninhabitable, that drove entire colonies to extinction. But something made him hesitate. If something was alive in there after days of abandonment, it deserved at least a chance. Against his better judgment, Carter overrode the locks. The security system fought him, throwing up warning after warning, but his salvager's toolkit had codes for almost every commercial lock system in the galaxy. The final lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. The door hissed open slowly, and the smell hit him first, even through his suit's filters. Blood, fear, and something wild and primal. Inside the darkened container, his helmet light caught silver-black fur. Carter's breath stopped in his chest. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small ground vehicle. A Fenrisian direwolf. She lay on her side, her breathing shallow and labored. Her beautiful fur was matted with dried blood, and her ribs showed through her coat. 3 small cubs huddled beneath her body, whimpering softly in the darkness. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, their eyes barely open, their bodies trembling from cold and hunger. The mother's eyes opened slowly, meeting Carter's gaze through his helmet visor. For a moment he couldn't move. Those eyes weren't the eyes of a mindless beast. They were intelligent, aware, and filled with desperate exhaustion. She was dying and she knew it. But she was still trying to protect her babies with the last of her strength. Carter accessed the ship's logs through his suit computer, pulling up the cargo manifest and transport records. The report loaded on his helmet display, and rage burned through him as he read it. The Vraxian crew had been transporting the wolves to some research facility, probably to be studied or experimented on. The mother had become what they called aggressive when handlers attempted to separate her from her cubs. She'd fought to protect her children as any mother would. Rather than deal with a protective mother, the Vraxian crew had made a choice that turned Carter's stomach. They'd sealed the container, reduced the life support to minimal levels, and abandoned the entire ship. They'd left these creatures to suffocate slowly in the cold darkness of space, alone and terrified. Ben's voice crackled through the comm again. "Carter, what have you found? Your vitals are spiking." Carter stared at the dying wolf and her cubs. 3 days, maybe 4, they'd been locked in this metal box. The air was thin and stale, barely enough oxygen to keep them alive. The mother had kept her cubs breathing, rationing the thin air, holding on with nothing but pure willpower and a mother's love. "Ben," Carter said quietly, his voice tight with emotion. "Prep the medical bay. And get Diana down to engineering. I need her to rig something. Fast." "What did you find? Something the rest of the galaxy gave up on?" The mother wolf watched him, too weak to move, as Carter carefully approached. Her eyes tracked his every movement, calculating whether he was another threat or something different. She'd been hurt by two-legged creatures before. She had every reason to fear him. Carter knelt slowly, keeping his gloved hands visible. "Easy, girl," he whispered, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone would translate. "I'm not like them. I promise you I'm not like them." The wolf's eyes stayed locked on his face. Then, impossibly, she lowered her head slightly. Not submission but a tentative acceptance. She was trusting him with the last bit of strength she had left. Carter began the careful process of moving the wolves to his ship, knowing his crew would think he'd lost his mind. Fenrisian direwolves were classified as Galaxy-class apex predators. They'd driven 3 colonial expeditions off their homeworld. Most species in the galaxy shot them on sight without question. But as Carter looked at the mother protecting her dying cubs, he didn't see a monster. He saw a mother who refused to give up, even when death was waiting in the darkness. And humans understood that kind of love better than most species in the galaxy ever could. Carter's ship hummed with tension as he carefully carried the first cub aboard through the docking corridor. The small creature whimpered softly in his arms, its eyes barely open, its tiny body trembling from days of starvation and cold. The cub couldn't have weighed more than 15 pounds, but it felt heavier somehow, the weight of responsibility pressing down on Carter's shoulders. Diana emerged from the engineering section, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. She took one look at the cub nestled in Carter's arms and went completely pale. Her eyes widened with recognition and fear. "Please tell me you're joking right now." "Medical bay," Carter said firmly, already moving past her. "Now." "Carter, I know exactly what it is, Diana." "Medical bay. I need you to rig something for their atmosphere requirements." Ben was already in the medical bay when Carter arrived, his fingers flying across the computer console as he pulled up every file he could find on Fenrisian biology. Most of the files were classified or restricted, requiring backchannel access codes that Ben had accumulated over years of research work. His face showed what they all knew in their hearts. This was supposed to be impossible. "Boss, the medical AI is saying we can't treat her," Ben said, shaking his head at the scrolling data. "Their physiology is too different from anything in our database. Their protein structures don't match known patterns. And those cubs, without their mother producing milk, they won't last 12 hours. Maybe less." Carter laid the first cub on the examination table as gently as he could. Its breathing was rapid and shallow, its small chest rising and falling too quickly. The cub's eyes were closed, and its whimpering had grown weaker during the short journey from the derelict ship. "Then we make it possible," Carter said quietly. "We figure it out." Victor appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. His voice was apologetic but firm when he spoke. "We should space them, Carter. I know how it sounds and I hate saying it, but keeping them alive risks the entire crew. One adult Fenrisian can tear through reinforced hull plating like it's cardboard. If she wakes up angry, if she thinks we're a threat to her cubs, she could kill us all before we reach the escape pods." "We're not spacing them," Carter said flatly, not looking up from the cub. "Carter, listen to me." "I said no." Carter's voice was sharp enough to end the argument. "We're not having this discussion. Find something useful to do or get off my bridge." Victor held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly and left without another word. The mother wolf, Luna, was far too large for the medical bay's examination table. Carter had to set her up in the main cargo hold instead, clearing space and constructing a makeshift recovery area using cargo netting, thermal blankets, and every soft material he could find on the ship. She was barely conscious when he moved her, her massive body limp and unresponsive. Her breathing was labored and wet-sounding, each breath an obvious struggle. The wounds on her side were infected, the flesh around them hot and swollen. Her body was shutting down from days without proper food or water, her systems failing one by one. Carter had seen dying animals before during his years in space, and he recognized the signs. Luna had maybe a day left, possibly less. Ben joined him in the cargo hold an hour later, carrying a data pad filled with research. I've been digging through black market xenobiology databases, he said, his voice tired but determined. Most of the official research is locked behind military clearances, but I found some old colonial surveys. Fenrisian respiratory systems aren't as alien as everyone claims. They're actually similar to Earth canines, just scaled up and adapted for higher gravity and thinner atmosphere. Can we replicate their air mixture? Carter asked. Diana's already working on it. She thinks she can modify the cargo hold's environmental controls to match their homeworld's composition. It'll take a few hours. Carter nodded, relief washing through him. It was a start at least. The real problem came with feeding. Ben had managed to synthesize a nutrient paste using the ship's recyclers, matching the protein structures found in the wolves' natural prey as closely as possible. But the cubs wouldn't take it from a bowl or bottle. They didn't understand what it was. They'd only ever nursed from their mother, and now she was too weak to provide for them. Carter watched the smallest cub growing weaker by the hour, its breathing becoming more shallow, its body temperature dropping despite the heating blankets. On the third night, Carter sat with the tiny creature cradled carefully in his arms. The cub was barely breathing anymore, its body cold to the touch even through his shirt. In desperation, Carter tried something that probably violated a dozen safety protocols. He warmed the nutrient paste in his hands until it matched body temperature, let it coat his fingers and gently pressed them to the cub's mouth. The cub latched on instinctively, sucking weakly at first, then stronger as it tasted the food. It worked. Carter spent the next 6 hours hand-feeding all 3 cubs one after another, rotating between them constantly, teaching them that food could come from him, that he was trying to help them survive. His arms ached. His back hurt from hunching over. But he didn't stop. Luna watched from across the cargo hold, too weak to lift her head but aware of everything. Her amber eyes never left Carter as he cared for her children through the long night. 2 weeks into the journey toward Fenris, the mother wolf had transformed from a dying captive into something magnificent. Carter had started calling her Luna after watching her howl at the viewport when they passed a lunar station. Her coat now shone silver-black under the ship's lights, healthy and thick. Her movements were fluid and powerful, full of the grace and strength that made her species legendary across the galaxy. She paced the cargo hold with quiet confidence, and her cubs tumbled after her in energetic bursts, playing and wrestling with each other. Carter sat on a cargo container one afternoon, reviewing star charts and plotting their course through the outer territories. He was so focused on the navigation data that he didn't hear Luna approach. She sat down beside him without a sound. Not at his feet like a pet, but beside him as an equal. Her shoulder reached his chest even while sitting, reminding him just how massive these creatures truly were. Luna watched the holographic display with clear interest, her head tilting as she studied the rotating planets and the lines showing their flight path. Her amber eyes tracked the movement of the stars, and Carter could have sworn she understood what she was looking at. "Smart girl," Carter murmured, reaching out to scratch behind her ear. "You know we're going home, don't you?" Luna's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. She turned to look at him directly, and Carter could swear he saw understanding in those intelligent amber eyes. Not just animal instinct but real comprehension. She knew they were taking her somewhere important. The cubs had grown rapidly over the past 2 weeks. Carter had named them Storm, Ash, and Little Ghost for her pale markings that made her look almost silver in certain lights. They explored every corner of the ship they were allowed access to, their natural curiosity absolutely boundless. Nothing escaped their attention. They investigated every sound, every smell, every piece of equipment they could reach. Diana had caught Storm trying to help in engineering 3 separate times. The cubs seemed fascinated by the glowing panels and moving parts, watching intently as Diana made repairs and adjustments. Ash had developed a strange fascination with the bridge controls, sitting for hours watching Ben work the navigation systems. Carter had started to wonder if the cub was actually learning how the ship operated. Ghost, the smallest of the 3, had claimed Carter as her personal human. She followed him everywhere, her gray-white coat a constant shadow at his heels. When he sat down to eat, Ghost curled up beside his chair. When he slept, she somehow managed to squeeze into his quarters and sleep beside his bunk. The crew joked that Carter had adopted a puppy, but Ghost was already the size of a large dog and still growing fast. Ben had come around completely to having the wolves aboard. He spent his free time researching Fenrisian pack behavior, diving into old colonial reports and biological studies. "Carter, you need to see this," he called one afternoon, his voice excited. "I've been analyzing Luna's interactions with the crew." Carter joined him at the monitoring station. Ben had compiled security footage from around the ship, editing it together to show patterns in Luna's behavior. The recordings showed something remarkable that Carter hadn't fully realized until seeing it all together. Luna had established a pack hierarchy on the ship, and she'd placed Carter at the top. She positioned herself between her cubs and anyone else who approached, acting as a protective barrier. She waited for Carter's approval before eating, watching him until he gave a small nod. She observed him constantly, learning the ship's routines, understanding cause and effect. When the lights dimmed for night cycle, she settled down to rest. When alarms sounded, she became alert immediately. "She's treating you like the alpha," Ben explained, replaying a clip where Luna stepped aside to let Carter pass first through a doorway. "But it's more than that. Watch this." He showed footage of Luna watching Carter work the cargo hold controls, her eyes tracking each button he pressed. Later footage showed her pawing at the same controls, as if trying to replicate what she'd seen. "She's studying us," Ben said, his voice filled with wonder. "Learning. This level of intelligence, Carter, it's way beyond what the official reports claim. The Galactic Council classified these creatures as mindless predators, but look at her. She's learning our language, our technology, our social structures." Carter had suspected as much over the past 2 weeks. He'd noticed the way Luna watched him work the controls, how she responded to verbal commands she shouldn't possibly understand, the way she seemed to anticipate danger before it happened. She'd figured out which alarm meant they were approaching another ship and which one was just a routine system check. Fenrisian direwolves weren't just predators. They were something the galaxy had refused to acknowledge. They were sentient. Fully, completely sentient. The proof came 3 days from Fenris when everything went wrong. The ship was passing through an unregulated sector, a stretch of space where pirates and smugglers operated freely beyond the reach of colonial law. Carter had chosen the route specifically to avoid official patrol zones, but he'd underestimated the danger. The proximity alarms shrieked suddenly, piercing through the quiet hum of the engines. A ship appeared on their scanners, its weapons already charging with threatening energy. The vessel was larger than theirs, heavily armed, and broadcasting signals on known pirate frequencies. "They're hailing us," Diana reported from the communication station, her voice tight with fear. The message was simple and brutal. "Surrender the Fenrisian specimens or be destroyed." Word had spread about Carter's cargo somehow. Someone had talked at one of the stations where they'd stopped for supplies. Now a rival salvage crew wanted the wolves for themselves. Fenrisians sold for millions on the black market to private collectors and illegal research facilities. Luna's head snapped up at the alarm, her ears flattening against her skull. She sensed the danger immediately, her body tensing as she moved protectively in front of her cubs. Carter's hand moved to the control panel. They were in serious trouble. Fenris appeared on the view screen like a jewel of green and silver, its 3 moons casting ghostly light across swirling cloud patterns. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, almost inviting, but Carter knew better. Warning beacons surrounded the entire system, their automated messages broadcasting on repeat across every frequency. The warnings were clear and harsh. Restricted world, no landing permitted, Class 5 hazard zone violators will be prosecuted. Carter reached forward and silenced them all with a single button press. The bridge fell quiet except for the hum of the engines. He turned to face his crew, giving them one last opportunity to back out. "Last chance to turn back," he said seriously. "Once we land, we're breaking about 15 different colonial laws. Anyone wants to leave, speak now." Ben snorted from the navigation station. "After all this? Not a chance, boss. We didn't come this far to chicken out now." Diana grinned from her engineering console, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've always wanted to see a death world up close. Besides, someone's got to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Victor just nodded from the weapons controls, his hands steady and calm. "Let's bring them home." Luna stood at the cargo hold viewport, her massive paws pressed against the reinforced glass. Her entire body vibrated with tension, but it wasn't aggression. It was recognition. She knew this place. She remembered it. The cubs crowded around her, pressing against their mother's legs, sensing her excitement and responding to it with their own nervous energy. Carter descended through the atmosphere carefully, his hands steady on the controls. He avoided the 3 abandoned colonial sites marked on ancient charts that he'd studied during the journey. Each settlement had met the same fate over the past 50 years. Complete loss within months. Buildings torn apart. Equipment destroyed. Colonists either killed or forced to flee for their lives. The official reports blamed Fenrisian savagery and unprovoked attacks. But Carter had learned the truth from studying pack behavior and reading between the lines of those reports. The colonists had come to Fenris with weapons and walls, treating the native wolves as monsters to be controlled or exterminated. They'd shot first and asked questions never. They'd built fortresses and poisoned the hunting grounds to keep the wolves away. They tried to terraform parts of the planet to suit human needs without considering the existing ecosystem. They'd never tried to understand the creatures who lived here. They'd never tried to communicate or coexist. They'd simply assumed that superior technology meant they had the right to take whatever they wanted. Carter brought the ship down in a twilight forest far from the failed colonies. Ancient trees stretched hundreds of feet into the sky, their trunks as wide as small buildings. Their silver-blue bark glowed faintly in the fading light, some kind of bioluminescent quality that made the entire forest look magical. The air that registered on his scanners was thick with life, rich with oxygen and complex organic compounds. Nothing like the sterile, hostile reports had suggested. He powered down the engines and opened the cargo hold ramp. The mechanism hummed as it lowered, creating a bridge between the ship and the alien soil. Luna stood at the threshold, her head raised high, breathing in the scent of her homeworld for the first time in months. Her nostrils flared as she took in familiar smells. Her cubs pressed against her legs, uncertain about this new place but trusting their mother's reaction. For a long moment Luna didn't move. She just stood there taking it all in. Then she turned and looked back at Carter. In that single gaze Carter saw everything. Gratitude for saving her life. Understanding of what he'd risked. Recognition that he was different from the others who had hurt her. She'd been stolen from this place by force. Locked in darkness. Left to die with her babies. And a human, one of the two-legged creatures she had every reason to hate with all her heart, had given it all back to her. Luna walked slowly back to where Carter stood. She touched her nose gently to his hand, her breath warm against his skin despite her size and power. Then she turned and led her cubs down the ramp and into the forest. Carter watched them go, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest that made it hard to breathe. "Goodbye, girl," he whispered. But Luna paused at the tree line where the ship's lights ended and the forest shadows began. She looked back at him once more, her amber eyes glowing in the darkness. Then she and her cubs disappeared into the shadows, melting into the forest as if they'd never been there at all. Diana stood beside Carter at the top of the ramp, watching the empty forest. "That's it then," she said softly. "Mission accomplished." Carter nodded slowly, trying to ignore the strange sense of loss he felt. They'd done what they came to do. They'd given Luna and her family their freedom back. Now they would return to their normal lives, and Luna would live hers in the wild where she belonged. He turned back toward the ship, ready to leave. A howl suddenly echoed through the forest, making him freeze in place. The sound was deep, resonant, and ancient. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through his chest. Then another howl answered from a different direction. And another. And another. The forest came alive with the sound. "Carter," Victor said nervously from inside the ship, his eyes on the scanner display. "Scanners are picking up movement. A lot of movement. Dozens of large creatures heading our way fast." Shapes began emerging from the tree line all around the landing site. Wolves. Dozens upon dozens of them, each one as massive as Luna. Their eyes glowed in the twilight like small stars, reflecting the ship's exterior lights. They moved silently through the undergrowth, surrounding the ship in a loose circle. Watching. Waiting. "Back inside," Carter ordered, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Slowly. No sudden movements. The mining colony on Fenris's moon was built deep into ancient rock formations, with tunnels cutting through mineral-rich deposits that made the operation profitable despite its remote location. 300 miners worked there in rotating shifts, humans mostly, with a few brave souls from other species who didn't mind the isolation. They'd chosen this location specifically because it was far from the trade routes and major shipping lanes. They wanted quiet. They wanted safety. They'd never expected trouble this far out in the frontier. The raiders had proven them wrong in the worst possible way. 12 ships had appeared without warning, surrounding the colony and cutting off all escape routes. Armed mercenaries breached the outer defenses within minutes, their military-grade equipment overwhelming the colony's basic security systems. They pushed toward the central habitat where the miners had retreated, sealing bulkhead doors behind them as they went. The miners fought desperately with whatever tools they could grab, mining equipment and maintenance tools against professional weapons, but they were workers, not soldiers. They didn't stand a chance. "Emergency bulkheads won't hold another 10 minutes, the colony administrator gasped into the emergency comm channel, his voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. "If anyone can hear this transmission, we need help. We need immediate assistance." Colonial forces are 3 days out and we don't have 3 hours. If anyone is listening, please. The transmission cut off suddenly as the raiders jammed the signal. The raider captain grinned as his forces moved methodically through the colony tunnels, checking each sealed door and bypassing security locks with practiced efficiency. This was easy money in his eyes. Hit the isolated mining colony, strip away the refined minerals worth millions on the black market, and vanish before colonial forces could respond. Simple, clean, and highly profitable. His crew had pulled off dozens of operations like this across the frontier. Then the sensors started screaming urgent warnings. "Captain, we've got incoming from the planet's surface," his scanner operator called out, his voice rising with confusion. "Dozens of them. Moving fast. Really fast." The captain moved to check the display himself, annoyed. "What kind of ships? Colonial patrol? Private security?" "That's the thing, sir," the operator said, his face pale as he stared at the readings. "They're not ships." The scanner display showed something that should have been impossible. Fenrisian direwolves were leaping from the planet's surface toward the moon. They were riding crude but clearly functional launch sleds that Carter and his engineering crew had cobbled together in 8 frantic hours after receiving the colony's distress call. Magnetic field propulsion sent them arcing through space, and the wolves rode the trajectory with natural grace, their bodies low and balanced like they'd been doing this their entire lives. "Shoot them down," the captain screamed at his weapons crew. "Fire everything." But the raiders had never fought opponents like this before. The wolves scattered mid-flight with perfect coordination, their pack instincts translating flawlessly to this new environment. They moved like a school of fish, each one reacting instantly to the other's movements. The raiders' weapons fire cut through empty space where the wolves had been a split second before. Then the wolves began landing on the raiders' ships themselves. Their claws, designed by nature to rend solid stone on their homeworld, tore through hull plating like it was paper. Atmosphere vented in explosive bursts, alarms shrieking throughout the raider fleet. Wolves pulled themselves along the hull surfaces, ripping into engine housings and weapon systems with terrifying efficiency. Inside the colony tunnels, the miners heard different sounds now. Not the cutting torches of raiders breaching their final defenses, but howling. Deep, resonant howling that echoed through the rock itself. The raiders in the tunnels heard it too, and several of them looked nervously at each other. One of them had spent time on frontier worlds. He knew that sound. "Captain," he said into his comm, his voice shaking. "Captain, those are Fenrisian wolves. They're here. They're in the tunnels." "That's impossible," the captain snapped back. "Wolves can't survive in." Luna emerged from a side passage that the raiders hadn't even known existed, Storm and Ash flanking her like trained soldiers. Behind them came the pack, more than 50 Fenrisian direwolves moving through the tunnels with silent purpose. Their eyes glowed in the emergency lighting like small fires. The raiders fired wildly, panic overriding their training. But the wolves moved like liquid shadows, flowing through the confined space with grace that shouldn't have been possible for creatures their size. They disarmed raiders with precise strikes, herding them toward the colony's holding areas. They disabled weapon systems with targeted attacks. And remarkably, incredibly, they didn't kill unless absolutely forced to. Carter's teachings had spread through Luna's pack and beyond. But their efficiency was still terrifying to witness. The raiders had been trained for combat against other humans, other predictable opponents. They had no training for facing apex predators who fought with intelligence, coordination, and purpose. Within minutes, the raid was over. Raiders lay unconscious or restrained throughout the tunnels. The wolves stood guard over them, calm and controlled, waiting. Carter's ship landed at the colony's main docking port just as the last raider surrendered. He emerged to find miners staring in absolute shock at wolves standing guard over their captured attackers. The colony administrator approached slowly, his eyes wide. "Someone want to tell me what in the name of all the stars just happened here?" Carter walked over to Luna, scratching behind her ear while Ghost pressed against his leg. The massive wolf leaned into his touch, her tail actually wagging slightly. "We heard you needed help," Carter said simply. Luna and her friends were kind enough to volunteer. "Those are Fenrisian direwolves," the administrator said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're supposed to be mindless killers. Monsters. The reports say." "The reports were wrong," Carter interrupted. "They're intelligent, social, and capable of incredible things when treated with respect."